Before Walmart, before Amazon, there was Main Street where every handshake meant something, and the butcher knew your name. Saturday mornings weren't about scrolling through screens or rushing to a crowded mall. They were about walking down the street where bells jingled as you opened a door, and familiar voices greeted you before you even stepped inside. The air carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the sound of laughter from children racing along the sidewalk, and the low hum of conversation between neighbors who never seemed too busy to stop and chat. Main Street in the 1970s was more than a place to shop. It was the heart of everyday life. Families knew the rhythm of the town, as well as they knew the creak of their own front porch steps. The butcher stood behind his counter, apron streaked with flour from wrapping paper, always ready to cut meat just the way you liked it. A barber spun his chair slowly, chatting with men who came in not just for a trim but for the company. At the five and dime, aisles were narrow and shelves were stacked with simple joys. Penny candy, toy soldiers, and greeting cards. These shops weren't just businesses. They were landmarks of memory. It was a world built on trust. Many stores still kept running tabs for families who would settle their bills at the end of the month. Handwritten notes could be left on the counter, and the shopkeeper would fill your order without question. People paid when they could, and promises meant more than signatures. Children walked home alone with bags of groceries, never fearing who might follow them, because every adult on the block was watching out for them. A sense of safety wasn't something you bought. It was something you inherited from the way life was lived. Shopkeepers didn't just sell things. They became part of the stories of the families they served. The grocer knew which bread your mother liked. The pharmacist asked after your grandmother's health. And the clerk at the clothing store remembered your size without measuring. Birthdays and anniversaries weren't just dates on a calendar. They were remembered in conversations and handwritten cards tucked into paper bags. To belong to a town meant more than owning a home. It meant being known. Looking back, it is easy to see that Main Street wasn't simply a place where people bought what they needed. It was a place where identity and belonging were woven into daily life. Every brick storefront carried more than products. It carried trust, memory, and connection. Life was slower, but in that slowness, people found time for each other. The hum of Main Street was the hum of community itself, and for many, it felt like America's heartbeat. But time doesn't stand still, and neither did America's way of shopping. Woolworths had grilled cheese. Jackpenny had creaky floors. Even the chains once felt like home. In the 1970s, the big names of American retail didn't feel like faceless corporations. They were woven right into the fabric of Main Street, standing shoulder to shoulder with the family-owned butcher and the corner hardware store. To most people, there was no sharp line between a local shop and a national brand. These stores felt familiar, comfortable, and part of the neighborhood. Walking into Woolworths meant more than buying what you needed. It meant stopping at the lunch counter for a grilled cheese or a slice of pie, often served by someone who knew your parents, your children, or both. Sears wasn't just a place for tools and appliances. It was where families flipped through thick catalogs together, circling toys and dresses in anticipation of birthdays and holidays. Jackpenny stores smelled faintly of polished wood and fabric, their wooden floors creaking under the steady steps of customers who had walked those aisles for decades. The presence of these chains didn't erase local character. They adapted to it. Storefronts matched the brick and stone of their surroundings. The signs were bright, but not overwhelming. Inside, the aisles were narrower, the displays simpler, and the atmosphere slower than what malls and big-box retailers would later bring. You could stop and chat with the cashier without feeling like you were holding up a line, and more often than not, that cashier was your neighbor's daughter or the friend of a cousin. Local hires gave the chains a hometown feel. For many families, these stores were reliable anchors in a changing world. When a child outgrew a pair of shoes, when the family needed a new winter coat, when school supplies had to be purchased, Places like Jack Penny and Sears became part of family traditions. Catalog orders arrived at the counter, where clerks greeted customers with a smile and a nod, helping them unpack boxes as if they were sharing in the excitement. It was retail, yes, but it was also ritual. Looking back, these chain stores carried an emotional weight that seems surprising today. They were bridges between small-town warmth and the wider world. A family in Kansas could shop at Sears, just like a family in New Jersey, but the experience still felt local. Every store carried the quirks of its town, shaped by the people who worked there and the neighbors who came through the door. They were, in a sense, hybrids, part corporation, part community. But nostalgia has a way of softening what came next. The coziness of Woolworth's counters and the creak of Penny's floors could not hold back the tide of change. The country was moving faster, suburbs were growing, and money was flowing toward new frontiers. But it wasn't long before these beloved names followed the money and the cars. The superstores didn't just sell more. They redefined what shopping meant in America. By the 1980s and 90s, the landscape had shifted. The worn creak of Main Street floors gave way to the polished shine of malls and sprawling big-box centers. Shopping no longer meant stepping into a familiar store downtown. It meant driving out to the edge of town, parking in vast lots, and walking into spaces that looked the same whether you were in Ohio, Texas, or California. The mall was designed to impress, but it also simplified. Bright lights, tiled floors, escalators, and climate control created an environment that felt efficient, even futuristic. Anchor stores, massive department retailers drew people in, while smaller chains filled the spaces in between. What had once been a unique experience tied to a single town was replaced with something standardized, carefully designed to move people quickly from one purchase to the next. It was shopping stripped of personality and refitted for scale. The rise of the big box store pushed this transformation even further. Chains like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot grew rapidly, offering everything under one roof at prices that independent businesses could never match. Aisles stretched longer, shelves reached higher, and the rhythm of shopping sped up. Bigger meant cheaper, and cheaper meant more customers. But bigger also meant colder. Shoppers traded personal connections for fluorescent lights, plastic carts, and automated registers. Every detail of these spaces spoke of efficiency rather than intimacy. Wide aisles were meant to handle more traffic. High ceilings and concrete floors echoed with impersonal hums. Store layouts were carefully replicated across states, so no matter where you went, the experience was nearly identical. There was comfort in knowing what to expect, but that predictability also drained away the character that once made shopping a human-centered ritual. Communities felt the change as much as individuals. While families enjoyed the savings and convenience, the cost was hidden in plain sight. Main Street stores could not compete, and one by one, they began to close their doors. The personal conversations, the shopkeepers who remembered your family's story, the handshakes and credit tabs, all of it was pushed aside by the relentless pull of volume and speed. Convenience overshadowed community, and price replaced trust as the reason people chose where to shop. Looking back, it is clear that these superstores didn't just reshape retail. They reshaped culture. Shopping became less about connection and more about consumption. The act of buying was no longer a shared community experience, but a solitary one, carried out under the fluorescent glow of efficiency. And once the giants left, Main Street began to fade store by store, window by window. The barber closed. The bell on the door stopped ringing. And just like that, Main Street went quiet. What had once been the heartbeat of a town slowly turned into silence. The shopkeepers who had spent their lives behind counters, greeting neighbors and watching generations grow up, began to retire or close their doors for good. Some left because they couldn't compete with the prices of the big box stores. Others simply gave up when the customers stopped coming. Bankruptcy papers replaced handwritten receipts, and the familiar signs above the storefronts came down one by one. Families who once walked together to buy bread or stop at the five and dime now drove miles away, searching for larger stores with wider aisles and cheaper deals. The decision wasn't made out of disloyalty. It was practicality. Every dollar mattered, and the giants promised to stretch those dollars further. But with each trip away from Main Street, a little more of the old community slipped into memory. The visual change was impossible to ignore. Once bright windows turned dark, and the paint on brick buildings began to peel. Glass cracked, weeds pushed through sidewalks, and empty shelves gathered dust behind locked doors. Main Street, once alive with the sound of chatter, footsteps, and laughter, now echoed with nothing but the occasional passing car. What had been vibrant and familiar started to resemble a row of forgotten relics, fading into neglect. The toll wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. People missed the simple warmth of being known. Without the barber asking about their children, or the grocer remembering their favorite cut of meat, many began to feel unseen. Loneliness crept in where trust and familiarity used to live. For those who had grown up running errands with their parents, these closures felt like the erasure of childhood itself. The candy jars at the counter, the squeak of the door hinges, the chalkboard signs with daily specials all became fragments of memory rather than part of daily life. Whole towns began to feel ghostly. The spaces that once drew neighbors together became reminders of what had been lost. A child riding through downtown on a bike in the late 1980s or 90s might have seen empty windows where their parents once bought back-to-school clothes, or boarded doors where their grandparents had lingered over coffee. The hollowing out of Main Street didn't just leave gaps in business. It left gaps in identity. For many, the collapse of the community was felt most sharply in the silence. It wasn't only the end of shopping as they knew it, but the end of being recognized, remembered, and rooted in a place where everyone once belonged. But it wasn't just stores we lost, it was something deeper. We gained speed, but lost our stories. Was it really worth it? The shift toward bigger stores and faster checkouts promised convenience, but it quietly traded away something priceless. Shopping had once been slow, deliberate, and filled with familiar faces. It was as much about conversation as it was about purchases. By the time efficiency took center stage, those moments of connection had all but vanished. At the new checkout lines, no one asked about your family. Clerks rotated so often that you rarely saw the same person twice. Transactions became mechanical. Scan, bag, pay, move on. The small talk that once stitched neighbors together was replaced by the beep of barcodes and the mechanical hum of receipt printers. Where once there had been warmth, there was now a strange kind of emptiness. Loneliness grew quietly in these spaces. Without the grocer who remembered your favorite bread or the barber who had watched you grow up, people moved through their days more quickly, but also more alone. The sense of being recognized, of belonging to a place where you mattered, was replaced by anonymity. You could fill a cart with everything you needed, but leave without a single human moment that felt real. Efficiency was the new ritual. Lists replaced routines. Instead of strolling down Main Street, greeting shopkeepers and running into friends, families hurried through aisles under bright lights, crossing items off before rushing to the car. The act of shopping had been stripped of its community spirit and repackaged into a streamlined process. Faster, yes, but also flatter, colder, and detached. With efficiency came the quiet death of traditions. The small rituals, kids buying penny candy, neighbors gathering at lunch counters, parents chatting with store owners while children tugged at their sleeves, slipped into the past. Shopping was no longer a shared cultural experience. It became a private errand, tucked into the margins of busier lives. And for many, the new world of consumerism began to feel hollow. Shelves overflowed with choices, Yet the abundance did not bring the same kind of joy that a simple bag of groceries once did when handed over by someone who knew your story. People were surrounded by more goods than ever before, but fewer connections. Progress came with a hidden cost: the erosion of memory, belonging, and the small comforts of daily recognition. This was the price of progress, a trade that gave us more for less, but left us wondering what exactly had been gained. The speed and savings were undeniable, but so was the emptiness that settled in their place. And just when Main Street thought it couldn't get worse, something even bigger arrived. Then came Amazon, and the store in your town became a website. What once required a drive, a stroll down Main Street, or even a trip to the mall, could now be done with a single click. It started in the late 1990s as a novelty, ordering books online, buying rare collectibles on eBay. But within a few short years, e-commerce wasn't just an alternative. It was the future, and it swept through American life like an avalanche. Amazon's rise changed habits faster than any retail revolution before it. No parking lots, no waiting in line, no store hours to worry about. Legacy names, the anchors of the 20th century, fell behind. Sears and Jack Penny, once synonymous with reliability, struggled to adapt. Their thick paper catalogs became relics of a slower era, while Amazon built an empire on algorithms and warehouses. For the first time, shopping was no longer tied to geography. It didn't matter where you lived, suburb, small town, or city. The world's largest marketplace was suddenly in your living room. The convenience was unmatched. Groceries delivered to your door, clothes arriving in days, sometimes hours. Books, electronics, household goods are all available without stepping outside. The errand that once shaped afternoons, weekends, or family outings shrank into a few solitary minutes at a screen. But in that very convenience, something essential disappeared. Shopping stopped being a physical, sensory experience. No more running your hand along a rack of new clothes. No more testing the ripeness of fruit. No more idle conversation with a cashier who remembered your family. The sound of bells on a shop door, the smell of fresh bread, the chatter of neighbors, all replaced by the silent arrival of a cardboard box on a doorstep. Even malls, once bustling symbols of social life, grew quiet. Teenagers who had once lingered in food courts and wandered hallways now sat at home scrolling through online stores. Shopping was no longer public. It was private. No crowds, no encounters, no community. Just you, a screen, and a shipping confirmation email. The digital avalanche reshaped not only how we bought things, but how we lived. Faster, easier, cheaper, yes, but lonelier too. The store was no longer a place. It was a website. But just as it all seemed lost, something surprising began to happen. A new generation is discovering the charm of old storefronts and breathing life into the past. What once felt like a slow and irreversible decline has begun, in pockets across the country, to turn around. The quiet streets of small towns are finding their voices again. The faded signs and boarded-up windows are being restored, painted, and reopened not as chain stores, but as coffee shops, bakeries, and little boutiques run by people who want to belong, not just sell. Farmers markets now set up where discount stores once held sway, their stalls overflowing with local produce, homemade jams, and fresh bread. The act of shopping becomes more than just a transaction. It becomes a ritual of connection. People linger, talk, and share. The farmers know their customers' names, just like the butchers and grocers of decades past. Every purchase feels like a story, not just a receipt. Historic buildings are being given second lives, too. Young entrepreneurs see beauty where others once saw decay. A century-old hardware store might reopen as a brewery. A forgotten corner shop might return as a book cafe. The creak of wooden floors and the glow of neon signs are no longer just memories. They are becoming part of daily life again. Festivals and parades, once traditions fading into photographs, are reappearing with fresh energy. Seasonal fairs, craft shows, and local celebrations draw families back to town squares. These events stitch together the same sense of belonging that was once woven into everyday errands. Neighbors who might have passed silently on suburban sidewalks now gather to share music, food, and laughter. Nostalgia itself has become a powerful force. In a world overwhelmed by screens, algorithms, and overnight shipping, the simple pleasure of walking into a shop where the owner greets you is something people are willing to seek and even pay more for. The word authentic has become a guiding star for this revival. Handmade goods, small batch products, and personal touches stand as quiet rebellions against the uniformity of big box and online shopping. The movement has a name, even if unspoken: slow living. It's not about rejecting progress, but about reclaiming rhythm. It's about choosing to spend time instead of just money, to buy fewer things but buy them with care, to see shopping not only as consumption, but as participation in a community. Main Street, once thought dead, is learning to breathe again. And while not every town has been reborn, the fact that many are trying shows something powerful. The pull of belonging never really goes away. Because no matter how much changes, one truth still holds. Main Street isn't just a place. It's a feeling. And in some towns, it's coming back to life. You can hear it in the laughter of children chasing one another past shop windows. You can see it in the glow of street lamps as neighbors linger after a Friday night parade. You can feel it in the way people gather, not because they have to, but because they want to. Main Street has always been more than brick and mortar. It is a memory. It belongs. Trends may rise and fall, but the values that built those streets endure. Trust, familiarity, the comfort of being known. These are not relics. They are threads running quietly through every generation. For all our devices, for all the speed and efficiency we've gained, people still crave the simple warmth of recognition. A nod from a shopkeeper, a chat at the counter, the steady rhythm of a community that sees you not as a customer, but as a neighbor. Main Street remains a symbol of America's heart. Even when it seemed abandoned, the longing for it never disappeared. We carried it with us in stories, in photographs, in the small treasures passed down from parents and grandparents. And now, slowly, in coffee shops tucked inside old buildings, in markets that echo the past, in parades that march once again, those memories are being written into the present. Nostalgia, in this way, is not just looking back. It is a bridge between generations. The teenager sipping an iced latte in a repurposed five and dime may not know the full history of the floor beneath her feet, but she feels something. A connection, however faint, to a rhythm that has guided lives for over a century. Grandparents see it too, the old blending with the new, proving that the spirit of Main Street never truly left. Because what endures is not the specific shops or the exact streets, but the sense of belonging they created. A reminder that home is not measured in square footage, but in the faces and voices that fill our days. And so, as we look at main streets across the country, some restored, some waiting, some only remembered, we're reminded of what matters most. Not the convenience of faster shopping, not the lure of endless choice, but the grounding comfort of place and people. That is the gift Main Street still offers, if we choose to hold on to it. Maybe you remember your Main Street diner, the shoe store, the scent of fresh bread in the morning. Or maybe you're just discovering it now, in a town trying to make old things new again. Either way, the story is yours too. So, share your memories. Tell the stories. Keep them alive. Because Main Street never really left. It's been waiting for us to return.